Javier is a 40-year-old widower and father of an adult son. He began working as a rideshare driver when he was about 25 years old. In the beginning, everything was very difficult, but over time he started to master his job. However, things were still not going well for him because he had many debts, such as overdue rent, a car payment close to being due, and other bills that worried him. Some friends recommended that he sell his car, but that was out of the question since his car was his tool for earning money, and without it, Javier wouldn't know what to do. So he worked double shifts day and night, which made him sleep poorly and little. Due to so much stress, he developed some health problems that required more expensive treatments, which was the last thing he needed at that moment. Still, he continued his heavy routine as a rideshare driver, working day and night. Javier met many people through his work, but he didn't like asking anyone for money because that would only create a snowball effect. If it was already hard to pay basic bills, imagine borrowing money from acquaintances. So, he preferred to work as much as possible to try to pay off everything and have a calmer and more peaceful life. One night, after dropping off a passenger at their destination, he was driving through a quiet suburban neighborhood. But it was in this neighborhood that his life changed, as he saw a very old woman dressed all in white and very disoriented. The woman seemed not to know where she was going, and Javier stopped his car and asked if she needed any help. The woman just turned to him and said she didn't remember her name or where she was. She only knew that someone had left her there. So, Javier asked her to get into his car, saying he would take her to the city to a police station where they might be able to help her. The woman entered the car with great difficulty. She appeared to be between 70 and 80 years old but was well dressed and did not seem to be homeless. Javier thought she had gone through something traumatic that left her disoriented and wanted to help. While driving, Javier asked her name but she said nothing. However, he felt he knew this woman from somewhere because her face was very familiar. She could have been one of his passengers over the years since he had driven hundreds or thousands of people over 15 years as a rideshare driver. He couldn't quite remember who she might be, so while driving, Javier tried to pull some information from his memory about who this lady could be. Let's go back 2 decades to Javier's memories when he was just 20 years old. Javier was in college, living with his uncle because his mother had recently passed away in an accident. Besides, he hadn't seen his father for over 10 years since his father had left his mother to live with another woman. After his mother's death, Javier even tried to stay with his father for a while, but living with his stepmother, Clarissa, and his half-siblings was not amicable. Within days, Clarissa argued, humiliated, and insulted the memory of Javier's mother. The fights with his stepmother were intense and heavy, and his father did absolutely nothing about it, only asking Javier to be patient and bear with the situation. Javier couldn't believe his father could be like that, and this made him leave home and not want to maintain contact with his father anymore. Javier never knew anything about his father or Clarissa again. So, he went to live with his uncle, a kind and wonderfully humorous man who charmed everyone in the house. In his uncle's house, there was another lady who was a housekeeper, helping with household chores. Her name was Alma, a 50-year-old woman who loved her job there. Alma liked Javier very much. She saw him as a son because she had lost her son when he was Javier's age, and this made her sympathize with Javier. Javier had a very tiring routine as he divided his time between studies and work. He didn't have time to go out with friends and could barely keep a girlfriend for long. But one day he met Sophia, a young teacher a bit older than him. She was about 27, but age was irrelevant to them as they got along very well. It would have been a perfect relationship if it weren't for Sophia's mother, Belinda, who was that example of a mother-in-law nobody likes to have. Belinda didn't like Javier at all because she thought he didn't have what it took to give her daughter a decent life. Belinda treated Javier extremely badly, making it visible to everyone. Besides always looking for reasons to argue with him, she also tried to end her daughter's relationship in every possible way. After many arguments and conflicts with his mother-in-law, Javier preferred to end his relationship with Sophia, which left him sad for a long time. Javier didn't understand people's problems because he worked, studied, and was honest and faithful. However, he saw some of his unscrupulous friends being more valued than him. He preferred not to think much about it and went on with his life. Some time later, Javier graduated. He had wanted to be an engineer since he was a child but couldn't find good job opportunities. Until one day, luck smiled upon him. A renowned company needed a substitute engineer for a certain period, and the engineer to be replaced was a friend of Javier's, making it easier for him to get this job. If his friend didn't return to work at the company, Javier could keep his job. Everything was going well. Javier was an excellent engineer. The salary wasn't perfect, but it covered all his needs. However, not everything was perfect. At his job, there was an older engineer, Luis, who didn't get along with Javier. He badmouthed him behind his back, spread rumors, and complained about his work, among other petty issues. Javier couldn't stand that for long and decided to resign, feeling that staying in a place with such a toxic colleague would only harm him, which was indeed happening as, despite being young, he started having unexplained headaches, and doctors advised him to avoid stress. So, he decided to live a calmer and more peaceful life, avoiding problems whenever they arose. Back in the present, Javier hurried to take the old lady to a police station where the police could help her be found by someone. But the poor woman started crying in Javier's car. In his mind, Javier hoped this wasn't happening because he didn't want any problems. The woman then just said, "They treated me badly, Javier, that's why I ran away." Javier was shocked that the woman knew his name, reinforcing his feeling that he knew her from somewhere but couldn't remember where. He stopped the car and asked her name, saying she seemed to be someone he had known in the past, but the woman remained silent. Javier decided to drive a bit faster to the nearest police station. Javier looked at the old woman but unfortunately couldn't remember who she was, though she knew who he was. But she didn't say her name. As Javier's car approached the city, the old lady said something that scared him. She said, "Forgive me for what I did," and then closed her eyes and fainted. Javier was frightened, thinking something had happened to her, and took her to the hospital. The woman was rushed to the emergency room. At the reception, they asked Javier his relationship with her, and he said he had just found her walking alone on the road and wanted to help. Nearby, a police officer named Carlos heard what Javier was saying and couldn't ignore it. He asked Javier to explain everything. Carlos was patrolling the area with his partner, and a work accident had brought them to the hospital, but it was nothing serious, just routine issues. Javier explained everything to the police officer, including that the woman might know him, but he couldn't remember who she was. Carlos doubted Javier's story and asked him to stay at the hospital until the woman woke up for further investigations. As Javier was divorced and lived alone, he didn't mind staying there for a while for Carlos' verifications. Hours passed, and Javier really wanted to remember who that woman could be, but she was very old, and her face might have changed a lot over the years. He was sure it could be one of the 4 people he had spent little time with in the past. His ex-girlfriend's mother, Belinda, or the older engineer from the company where he worked as an engineer, Luis, or even his stepmother, Clarissa, whose face he preferred to forget because of all the humiliation and disrespect she had shown him. Lastly, it could be the kind housekeeper who worked for his grandmother, Alma. These were the most straightforward options, but it could be anyone. While Javier waited in the hospital reception, the doctor came out of the emergency room and asked to speak with Carlos. The doctor said the woman had gone through unpleasant things wherever she lived and had given her address and name to the doctor, stating Javier was just helping her. So, the doctor gave the address to the police officer to resolve the situation. Afterward, the doctor, Dr. Andres, called Javier to his office. Javier was puzzled by the whole situation because, at first, it seemed like something supernatural. A woman in white on the road asking for a ride at night is terrifying to anyone, and the worst part is that she knew his name while he didn't remember her. Moreover, Javier felt he had gotten himself into a big problem. Dr. Andres said that if the woman hadn't woken up or had died, Javier would be in big trouble. Javier wiped his forehead and breathed a sigh of relief, then asked what Dr. Andres wanted to talk to him about. First, the doctor said he needed to take better care of his mental health because, perhaps due to so much stress in his life, he had serious memory problems that could worsen. Javier agreed and explained that with so many financial problems, clients and his life, all he could do was endure in silence and move on. Dr. Andres admired Javier's life story and congratulated him for what he did for the woman on that terrible night. Javier was scared, but the doctor explained that she had been suffering mistreatment at home. Her husband had died years ago, and her children treated her badly. She had a wonderful financial situation, which she mentioned to the doctor, but her children took all her money and didn't leave her a cent. Moreover, they didn't allow her to leave the house for anything, and for years she hadn't set foot outside. Dr. Andres and other doctors examined her and found that she was lucid and had full control of all her mental and physical functions. Still, her children had obtained false documents to prove she was incapable of taking care of herself, all just for her money. So, that night, the woman managed to escape from where she had been confined for almost 2 decades without leaving the house and went to the road to seek help. Javier appeared like an angel, even though he was stressed and had many problems. Javier wanted to help, despite being afraid it might be some kind of robbery, so he stopped to check. Meanwhile, across the city, Carlos and a team of police officers were arresting the woman's children for mistreatment and document forgery. Shortly after the accused were taken into custody, Carlos saw a photo and understood the other part of the story, the reason why the woman knew Javier. At the hospital, Dr. Andres asked Javier to go talk to the woman in her room. When he arrived at the room, Javier saw the woman sitting on the bed and asked how she was. She replied that she was now well, thanks to him, because if he hadn't stopped the car and helped her, her children would have taken her back to that terrible place she once called home. She thanked him and asked if he really didn't remember her. But Javier said that many people had passed through his life and that due to many problems and stress, he had memory issues but nothing alarming. He asked if she could explain everything because he almost got into big trouble for helping her, but was relieved to know she was well. The woman apologized for causing him so much trouble that night and also apologized for causing him problems in the past. Javier asked once again, "But who are you?" "My dear, I was very cruel to you at that time. Our lives could have been so different if I had been a better person. But all these years living confined and mistreated by the people who should have loved me, I thought a lot about my actions. So today, when I saw you stopping your car to help me, I had the chance to change all the harm I did. I know you don't remember me, but it's me, Clarissa, your stepmother. I know you will never forgive me for being cruel to you, but when you left, your father was very sad, but I was happy. I know I was selfish and cruel, but life gave me the return I deserved. I was already 50 years old, and your father and I had children. Maybe you remember them. Unfortunately, our children were cruel to me. After a few years, your father passed away, and I took care of everything and worked simultaneously. When I started receiving my pension and your father's pension, our children began to show their greedy and petty sides. They took my money and used it as they pleased. I inherited a large sum of money from my parents, but I couldn't enjoy that money for years. They kept me confined at home, and I couldn't do much because we lived far from the city, and it was almost impossible to seek help there. They cut off telephone access and there was no internet. I was isolated from the world, thinking about the harm I did to many people, including you. Your father loved you very much but chose to stay by my side. He was the only person who loved me in life, but I want you to know that he loved you too. After today, after almost 20 years, I am a free woman and can live in peace. Even so, I will drop the charges against my children and only demand that they live far from me and live their own lives." Javier was shocked by all this. To him, she really seemed like a ghost, but Javier lived a life that no longer harbored resentment towards anyone. So, Clarissa asked if he could forgive her for everything, and he said yes, that she didn't need to worry about it anymore. 5 years passed. Clarissa had passed away from old age, but before she died, she made Javier her heir so he could have a calmer and more peaceful life. Moreover, he could take better care of his health. To Javier, people have their ways of being, their different points of view, opinions, and he respects that without arguing when someone doesn't like him or disagrees with him. That way he goes on with his life. Javier didn't quit his job because he loves what he does and will do it until his last days. Even so, he carries with him the thought that he shouldn't hold grudges or resent anyone because what happened, happened. Dear viewers, if you like this story, please subscribe to our channel to receive more stories every day. Share with us what you think of this story.